Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ. With me today, I've got Henrik Jarleskog, and I learned how to pronounce that as it translates to the Earl of the Forest in Swedish. He is the head of the future of work at Sodexo. And as he puts it, it's a journey of leadership and innovation. And in fact, it's a huge role because Sodexo, if you haven't heard of them, they are one of the largest employers in the world. In fact, they employ over 400,000 people worldwide and serve 80 million consumers every single day. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ross. I'm humbled to be here. Looking forward to an interesting conversation today.
Well, let's see what we can do about that. In the warm up, I often, get to know somebody, and I've got a hunch that this is going to be a good one. So, Henrik was hired to transform Sodexo, make it grow faster, improve its margins, to innovate at speed. And that might be an interesting sort of concept of future of work, and hired to grow faster, improve its margins, and to innovate at speed. And so the European CEO entrusted you with this crucial mission to sort of deepen the understanding of their clients. So that might be quite different to maybe some people's perceptions of what is head of future of work. So I'd love to perhaps just start there, Henrik, of what really is your role
Yeah.
and some of the misconceptions that people have with that kind of title.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I usually get that question, and I think it's good to baseline what it is about. We aren't that many heads of future work yet, I must say, but for me, this role really started in the beginning of the pandemic, where I sat down with my CEO. At the time, I was heading up strategy for Europe and was kind of the right hand to the CEO. And he said, so, Henrik, our world is transforming around us because of the pandemic, and no one knows what will happen when the pandemic kind of has ended. Because what we see right now is that companies start to work in new ways with remote work. Hybrid work is on the rise, and you have to remember that this was 5 years ago now, but at the time, he entrusted me with the topic of understanding the future of work, because he already then, as a forthcoming, CEO, saw that if we are going to stay relevant, we need to adapt to this new environment. What kind of new services, what kind of innovations, what are the needs that are arising at the Fortune 500s of this world? How can we help them? How can we make their organization thrive? So that's a lot about what my job as the head of future work is about, really understanding that movement, being out there with clients, giving advice. Sometimes I sit on their leadership team, facilitate their discussions, a lot of gridlock discussions, like which path should we take? Should we design a new operating model? Should we go back to the office 100%? A lot of the super dynamic debates and discussions in these Fortune 500 companies and others, of course.
And it's critical to have that connection with an audience and with a marketplace, right? And the responsibility to understand how business models are flexing, how emergent technologies are shifting, so that you're not caught off guard, right?
Exactly.
So that you can have that foresight. And what an opportunity to be in those rooms, right? Be in those rooms as a strategic conversation. And I'm curious, you mentioned hit on a few big ones, right? Hybrid work, return to office. Those are very critical for a company like Sodexo, right? That in terms of their core propositions of facilities management, serving food in these huge buildings. I mean, I've been to many UN monstrous buildings, and how they have to feed people in short periods of time at scale is a tough job and tough role. If industries are shifting and moving of where are we doing work, how are we doing work, the downstream supply chain has a big effect. So give me some, some things of some of the conversations that are going on right now, a little bit more.
I think we need to kind of back the tape exactly what you're talking about, because everyone who have a fair bit of education within business model design understands that a company like us, we are the world's 18th largest employer. Our revenue model has built on, having people on the ground doing services for our clients. And whenever companies withdraw their people from the offices, that hits our revenue directly. So it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning of the pandemic. Revenues were dropping vastly and really fast. And we were, in a position where we had to really renegotiate a lot of contracts and start thinking about, how can you build a more sustainable business model? Can we become more flexible and these kind of things? So a couple of the things that are major discussions right now in the food and facilities management industry, which is also one of the largest industries of the world, of course, is that how can we serve our clients in a dynamic way? Because it is a truth, and it has been proven so many times, that there is, in general, this Wednesday mountain of people in the offices right now happening. A bit dependent on which kind of country you're in, but that normal distribution almost over a week is happening. So we have too much people on the ground on Mondays and Fridays, and we are not enough on Wednesdays because our contract is kind of rigid to a lot of the extent. So that dialogue with clients is quite exciting. How can we develop a new industry that is more dynamic, really doing different types of deliveries during Mondays and Fridays with some ingenious ways of even becoming, a magnet and a help for some organizations who want to have their people more time in the office by providing a great place to work. And I think that's number two, right? If there are so much competition going on right now. I'm sitting at home today. I love being in the office, but that's because my office is a great place to work.
Yeah.
So the future office needs to be better than the choices people have for them to choose to be there. That's number two, I think. So these are two examples of the really big questions on the table
It
right
is.
now.
It makes me think a little bit of like energy demand, right? In
Mm.
terms of energy providers and grid networks of, okay, when are the peak times? And you have dynamic pricing around that. We've just changed actually our energy contract to an EV contract. So we've had an electric vehicle for many, many years. And our energy provider has launched a service where it's a bit similar to where you used to have the nighttime energy pieces where the kilowatt hours were cheaper in the evening. Well,
Yeah.
what this one does is it actually links to the smart app of the charging unit of the
Mm.
car's app, and we'll charge it accordingly to when the demand of 7p a kilowatt hour as opposed to 26p a kilowatt hour. So you'll plug it in and it won't
Yeah.
charge it, and it will communicate in a smart way between the device, the vehicle's app, and the provider. And I think there's a similarity, as you said there, about, okay, this people don't want to go in Monday and Friday. It's great, we can extend our weekend, be at home, and then this
Mm.
peak in at the midpoint of Wednesday. And not only the staff, but also the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got all the logistics behind what those services are being provided that
Mm.
need to coordinate with that. So that's one component. And then the other component is, why are we going in?
Yeah.
And it's shifting from, oh, we need to go in to get the work done, because we can get the work done in a lot of places, a lot of industries without going in. So what
Yeah.
is it? What is the experience? What's the connection? A human connection with another person being in the
Yeah.
same room. And I think,
That's still number one on the list, actually,
yeah,
on why we choose to go
yeah.
in. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. And I miss it. I work from home. I used to, go into an office with other people and hang out.
Mm.
And I have recognized the discipline and what I miss from working at home
Yeah.
of just being in the room of other people. There's some things I just don't do as well as a human being by not being around others. And
Yeah.
that's challenging.
Yeah.
And I think many people are beginning to really understand how do we provide that environment. And therefore, the physicality, the structure of the office, everything will shift.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people love being around
Mm,
people. So
mm.
that's the thing. And
On
I
their
think this
terms, right?
on their
Yeah,
terms. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And I think this is also one of the miscomprehensions of this debate, because when you see headlines in newspapers around return to office, a lot of people, immediately think that that means 100% of the time. But that's a miscomprehension, because a lot of these companies, they just say, okay, we want to spend some time together. And I think that's the future. And that's also probably hitting on the two largest macroeconomic social changes that are going on at this point in time. Number one is that distributed work is here to stay. And not to be mixed up with remote work, because that's something else. Because distributed work, that started already 12, 15 years ago, where a lot of global corporations started to pop up offices in new countries, new parts of the world, to untap kind of emerging markets, or untap talent that they haven't had before, or just get new talents on board. And number two is obviously that companies are doing more with less, which is also a good, I would say, bridge from that EV idea that you talked about. So companies are, for the first time in history, at the same time as they are laying off tens of thousands of companies, they are, employees, they are hiring new ones, because they have such a demand to change. And they have decided that they probably don't have time to reskill or upskill either.
Yeah.
I think that AMD NVIDIA case is super interesting to have a look at, right? Because that's what's happening. So AMD, they are really in a fast transformation window at this point in time. So I think that's the first time in history that you see it, that in a gold rush, people are being laid off, but at the same time they're hiring. And combine that with that distributed work movement, where people actually work on the same company, the same kind of office, on the same team, but in completely different parts of the world,
Yeah.
working synchronously. And I think that's the thing that is happening right
Yeah.
now. It's
It's the
huge.
duality, as
It's the
you've said.
duality. Yeah. Yeah.
And to reconcile that as a leader, to reconcile that strategically as a business, and then to implement it in a humane way
Yeah.
is challenging as well, right? And we have this, the speed between the, buy, build, and borrow of talent, of where are we doing it? Is it talent
Yeah.
on demand? Is it, can we reskill and have employee mobility? Does that meet the need and scalable quick enough? Do we have to, get rid and buy in? And all of those things creates a different operating model to then different propositions, right? And you're
Yeah.
at this interesting intersection for, as you said, 18th largest employer in the world, and who they serve.
Yeah.
And as a sort of strategic, almost business development, strategic direction of what's going on, you're seeing that maybe at the edges and at the fringes, and then it gets distributed over time. What are
Yeah.
some of the challenges you're seeing between recognizing a trend and something happening, and then getting a business model, a structure, an operational impact to then shift? So if you see something,
Yeah.
right, here's what's going on, we need to do this,
Yeah.
and this being done, what are some of the challenges you're seeing in that process?
Yeah, it's a big question, Ross. And I think there are different types of dimension that we need to dissect in order to answer that question, because I work with all of the kinds of companies. Yes, as you say, I have a unique vantage point, because I see how different types of companies are strategizing, how they are changing, everything from manufacturing companies to telecom to professional services, different peers, and taking different routes for the future. They were everything from full-time in office companies to fully flexible, and everything in between. And we, need to serve all of these ways of working. So we need to figure out how to serve clients depending on which strategy they are choosing. So what we are doing and how we are transforming and how we are adapting differs on the type of way of working, more or less. Obviously, a huge change, because only 5 years ago, before the pandemic, all companies more or less worked in the same way. We could provide our services the same way, Monday to Friday. That's not the case anymore. So, for example, one of my biggest, I would say, interests is to follow how many percent of companies are full-time in offices, or are structured hybrid, or are fully flexible, to be able to kind of weigh what's most important for us as a huge company serving so many thousands of companies. You know, we serve over 80 million people per day with our services, and you know, that's also why I need to understand how can I give advice to Sodexo in order to adapt where to, you know, where is the biggest chunk of our clients.
And it's huge, right? If you're serving 80 million people per day, and they shift their requirements,
Yeah.
right? And no longer is it, okay, it's a hub of a traditional location, a base, a time period, and a body of people to serve. So all of the setup around that to then, as
Yeah.
you said, distributed. If they are hybrid and they're at home, and when are they at home, and what do they now need, and can we serve them? How would we serve them? Should we serve them? Is it economically viable to serve them when they are N of one versus, you know, a collection and a collective?
Exactly. And it's just profound, right, to think about it. How can we improve people's lives independent on what kind of model or company they are working for? And I'm thinking that the full-time in office companies, if you look at it from a Fortune 500 perspective first, super interesting. do you have a clue on how many of the Fortune 500 companies who have their people in the office 100% of the time?
I would say 100% of their time is going to be a lower number. I think probably 40% would be my guess.
Yeah, so it's a common guess, and it's actually 10x wrong. So it's 4%.
Okay. 4% in there all the time.
4% of the Fortune 500 companies who have kind of an open strategy about how they are going to work, and you know, where and when, you know, it's 4% of them
4%
have their
have an
people.
open strategy.
They, you know, who have kind of
More
sent to the rest of the world in an open format on their homepages, where you actually can go in and analyze what they're doing and how they're working. Out of those in the Fortune 500 list, only 4% are 100% time of the time in the office. So that means that's the smallest part, because 10% are fully flexible.
Okay.
So it's twice as common to be fully flexible compared
As
to
it is to be always in.
Yeah.
And so what's the other percentages made up from then?
It's a structured hybrid model.
Okay.
Like they have an expectation of having
doing
people
3
being
days in
2 or 3 days in the office, more or less. And models in between, of course. So 86% are on some form of hybrid.
Interesting.
I think that's super interesting, just to kind of see how that changes, because if you look at it from a perspective of not only Fortune 500, but all the companies or organizations that we, you know, can gather data around, and it's the biggest database holds around 12,000 companies and 120, I think, million users. Then the picture looks vastly different. Then it's around 1/3 of each, so like 1/3 being full-time in office, 1/3 hybrid, and 1/3 almost fully flexible. So it is a difference comparing Fortune 500 companies to all of the companies, of course.
Yeah. And that's about where the market opportunity is for you currently, what you need to change and adapt from current systems of those things. So in terms of then, you get that data, and you mentioned during the pandemic, that was a massive hit to the business model of the organization. How did you adapt? What did you do? What were some of those things? Because I know that there was a platform launched. What does that mean? This future of work platform. What were some of those things to respond to that? And let's just start there, and then I've got a few follow-ons I want to
Yeah,
cover.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing, when you have a global movement like this, you really need to understand it bit by bit. Slice the elephant, if you like. So we started doing a lot of surveys, surveying companies, surveying different parts of businesses all around the world, really taking a data-driven approach on expectation, what is working, what is not working, what are the demands, what do people like? Even looking at, okay, do we think that this will affect mental health or physical health, or taking a holistic perspective and really trying to understand where this is going. And we, of course, started to create white papers. We did a lot of webinars, built networks globally, and really, starting to understand how can we then adapt at the same time as we, as I said, renegotiated tens of thousands of contracts, but also going in the more, I would say, flexible way of building the business. Not any longer saying that, okay, we will form this really rigid contract of 3 + 2 years, and this is what is going to be done, and really frame that in, but becoming much more flexible and saying, okay, let's go this direction. We can exit for convenience in 6 months, for example, and you could do that on both sides. So increasing that flexibility in the actual business model is part of this adaptation to the new ways of working, because it can't change in a really fast fashion too. So starting to understand stuff like that, starting to understand individual needs, starting to understand really corporate needs, and strategizing, creating playbooks in order to be able to give advice to companies on how they could take steps of understanding their own situation. Do they, for example, know how much they utilize their office today? And what does that say? Do they use the offices, the full footprint they have globally in the same way, or is it any reason to believe that it would change? So that's also part of the game of really understanding this. But I would say the real inflection point started to come when we understood the challenges that were specific for companies choosing a full time in office model. They have different challenges compared to the companies going structured hybrid, for example.
Some industries lend themselves more to being able to do those sorts of things, right?
Yeah,
in different ways.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the fully flexible companies, they also have their own unique set of challenges and things that they need to solve. And when we started to understand that, we can also start to understand, okay, what kind of market segments are, in
more attractive or in different operating models, so that
in different operating models, and we can adapt our delivery towards it. And I think that's not common knowledge at all. This is something that is probably unique for me in my role, being able to see how that is now growing going forward.
And some things come out from left field, like the pandemic, and you have to respond to it. Other things are where you get early whispers and early research into trends that are not evenly distributed. And then if they follow the exponential curve, they then suddenly hit us. So from something like hybrid work to, I'd like to explore maybe some Horizon 2, Horizon 3 type impacts to how we work, from the thought of, oh, I have a outcome and result I'm looking for. And traditional thought of doing that is, who's the person, what's the talent, what the skills I need, and bring them in, onboard them, and then they provide that service in whichever business it is, whether that's somebody front of desk in a hotel, or it's a consultant, or wherever it may be. And we're starting to enter into a world that isn't just Star Trek and on film, of where roles are going to be serviced by circuits other than robotics, but in terms of knowledge based services and
Yeah.
physical services by technology, not by humans.
Yeah.
And this is a, compounding effect of a lot of these exponential technologies. And I've seen a lot of interesting trend reports about humanoid robots, in
Yeah.
terms of how many of those are going to be in the workforce in the not too distant future, in very, very large numbers. So where something like the pandemic was probably not on the radar of many people at the end of 2019 that were even thinking in that way,
Mm.
to how are you thinking about a future of work that is filled with millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of humanoid robots doing work and serving that? Is that something you're thinking about? Is that something companies are talking about yet? Or is that too far horizon 3 thinking in your view at the moment?
Companies are talking about it all over the place on how AI may change or completely transform industries or companies or clients or contracts, whatever it may be. So that dialogue is ongoing all the time. Humanoids, yeah, I think we include AI into that.
Yeah, AI, humanoid robots,
Yeah,
we're seeing, and we've seen them in factories, in logistic
yeah,
companies, Ocado, they've got thousands of robotics in the warehouses, those sorts of things.
yeah,
But in terms of take car ownership, right?
yeah.
Lots of people have cars. You can, lease one now, a few $100s. When leasing a humanoid robot that can
Mm,
do similar things to a human, and we'd start probably with the dangerous, dirty, and disgusting type jobs
yeah.
for similar values. When they fall below the $40,000-$50,000 per unit,
Mm,
i.e., a salary wage rate,
yeah.
to get one of those that totally transforms how work is done.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
fascinated as
I'm
to what
totally with
companies are
you.
thinking about, and what
Yeah,
is a company like Sodexo thinking about, when instead of it being about hybrid and where people work, it's who's doing the work, a
yeah,
human that needs this or a robot that needs that, or whatever it may be.
yeah. I like that framing, and I think I attended a super interesting conference last spring in Lisbon called Running Remote. This is where I saw a presentation on partly, this message, which is about the first manufacturing company in the world that doesn't have any employees is already existing.
Mm-hmm.
More or less. They
Yep.
have employees, but the management of that manufacturing plant, they don't sit at the actual manufacturing plant. They sit remote and they run the robots in that manufacturing plant from a completely different place in the world. So I think this is already happening, not only in tech. But the interesting thing with that presentation was that, wow, it's happening within manufacturing.
Manufacturing, healthcare, food service. You
Mm,
can go in and get a fully
yeah,
from end to end, from entering
yeah,
a place, not interacting with a human, and get a
yeah,
service provided, whether that's in
absolutely.
healthcare, medication, as you said, manufacturing, whether that's in food service. They
Mm,
exist in some pockets.
they
Um,
do.
yeah.
And I think it will hit pretty much every industry. I have done a lot of thinking on this topic myself in my kind of role as the head of future work, really trying to understand this, because I felt early in 2024 that the AI train was about to leave the station, right? Wow, I need to make myself much more conversant on the topic, really understand it, see how it maybe, how I as an individual can use AI already now, because I really felt I could. So I invested in a great education for a month of time, which takes you from a noob to a master within 28 days. And the goal with that course was to get your own AI team in the end of that month. And it really delivered. And these days and today, I have 5 AI colleagues working for me 24/7. I have a strategist, I have a communications executive, I have a PowerPoint producer, I have a executive assistant, and I have a video producer as well. They're working for me whenever I want, and they do such a great job. And that experience has been really transformative from a personal perspective, because then I understand what the potential is for the rest of the world. It is a limiting way of looking at the world if you're kind of trying to understand what kind of technical projects can AI do for a given company. For example, take Sodexo, for example. Can AI help us reduce food waste globally to work for to more chill world and save the planet? Yes, that's one way of looking at it, but it's much more powerful when you understand what it actually can do for you as an individual, because you will understand that, okay, I can cut 30-40% of my administrative time. I can become much more creative. I can overcome my hurdles of procrastination with the blink of an eye with help of AI. So I've become much more productive, faster, more innovative. I can innovate on a deeper level, and I can, enjoy work easier. So I think that's the whole absolute experience for me that has been transformative when thinking about humanoids and AI on an individual level.
Yeah, and technology has always been a multiplier of intent,
Yeah.
right? Desire. And we've got a lot of things going on, political shifts in the world that are going to influence and impact technology adoption, distribution, regulation, laws, all sorts of things, from US to China to Europe, and how we all navigate this. And where, we had the rise of, intelligence of software to do things, and software as a service, to shifting to results as a service, as agents, as you described, getting the end result rather than I've got a tool that makes me more productive. I've actually empowered a entity, a series of zeros and ones, to give me a result after that, and the way in which the barrier of entry is reducing, that it's just conversation to do that. That is then being the power engine in many other things. So even if we come back to humanoid robots and we look at figure one, in a couple of years, they're not having to do all of these complex training, programming, all of those things. Plug it into some other technology, and we start adding these things in, and they can just observe, a human making a coffee from a coffee machine 50 times, and now that robot can do that same task and do those sorts of things.
Exactly.
And we're only a few years into some of these key breakthroughs of what does it then mean that you said, I've got 5, AI colleagues. For companies that are making these mass layoffs, and then they're, making them huge investments of new skills. That again, that train is going to be, very soon, mass layoffs again, and then new skills, and mass layoffs, a new skill, a mass layoff, and it's going to be relentless. And so one of the things that we're very much, our purpose is, how do we ensure everyone can adapt? What are those skills to be able to adapt? Do it in a healthy way, making sure that no one's left behind, i.e. everyone has a future where they belong. I can contribute, I'm valued. And that's going to take a lot of, figuring out. There's going to be some health issues along that way and that world. So are you involved in not only strategically, this is what's going on, this is what we need to do as a business, but what are ethical concerns? What are the human concerns about people and their well-being? How important is that, do you believe, in the work that you're perhaps doing? Is that another department, another area, or is that part of the strategic conversation?
It's 100% close to my heart, and I'm really happy that you bring this up, because this is one of the most transformative dialogues I have at this point in time. Is actually that the future of work discussion has been about the lucky few knowledge workers in offices that can kind of enjoy flexible work in a distributed working model. And that is not fair, probably, because that's all people already that have had a kind of a longer education, quite well paid. They have some mandates to decide when and where they work, and now suddenly they have that flexibility. Um, um, and that it doesn't really feel well in my stomach talking about this topic sometimes, because still there are at least as many people who are tied to their workplace who can enjoy flexible work. But the last months, I've realized that people who are tied to the workplace, let's say, for example, kitchen workers or chefs, very creative people, fantastic work ethic. They love their job because, you know, they love to cook, and that's a creative profession. But that is also sometimes not conducive to being I would say a family or a provider of a family, because it's really demanding work hours. You work when people are off, for example, and it's difficult to be there for your kids, for example. So they haven't really had that flexibility, but now there are platforms coming which enables people who are tied to their jobs to work in a flexible fashion. So thinking about that, with distributed work is here to stay, companies are doing more with fewer people and these large societal trends. I think the third one is that everyone more or less can enjoy flexible work if we have the right technological help to do so. Because with these platforms, you can easily swap shifts, or you can make sure that you know, join those type of companies instead, that actually allow you to enjoy flexible work, being a provider or a father or a mother to a family, and still keeping the job you want. And I think that's democratizing the whole future work debate, because it's well needed.
And we can't unsee these things, and we can't unexperience them. So if we've had a moment of those things, what previously might have been unknown, and we just were expected to do something, we've now seen it, and we suddenly feel we might have a ball and chain, you know, around our inability to be flexible. And what it sounds like is there is opportunities through technology, different platforms. How can we schedule differently? How can I show up and serve differently?
Yeah.
And I think what's fascinating is it's still then decisions of people to allow that to happen. And there's often fear in change, you know,
Yeah.
and in our model we look at, you know, there's 5 core skills of, okay, we need grit, we need mental flexibility, we need, you know, unlearning, to let go consciously of what's been, to allow other things to come in. We need resilience when, oh, we tried it and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, how might we learn from that and move forward? We then have certain characteristics that people might have of why Henrik changes to
Mm.
something might be very different to me. You might be
Mm.
because you want to win and gain something new. I might be because I want to protect something I love, i.e., I want to keep that job I've got.
Yeah.
That's what, if I make this change and I can keep my job, I'll do it. If it's, oh, I can't keep that job, I have to get a new one, I'm not interested in a new one because that doesn't motivate me. And
Yeah.
therefore I put up barriers and I put up pieces. And then we
Exactly.
have in our model is that we never change in a silo. We never adapt in a silo. We adapt in an environment. What
Mm.
is the level of work stress? What's the level of, you know, of psychological safety, of the team stress that it's under? What's the emotional health of the organization to respond to data, to insights, to those opportunities? You know,
Mm.
these things exist. You've said they
Yeah.
exist. Platforms exist. Technology
Mm.
exists. Yet they're often not used, or they're used when it's too late. And I
Yeah.
think the danger is that companies will inevitably miss the boat. They will be left behind, have to evolve differently on
Mm.
terms that are probably less healthy, and the consequences less good. So
Mm.
I'm aware of our, you know, time frame of this podcast and the conversations. And in the last kind of wrap up, I want to do 2 bits. The first one
Mm.
is there anything you would have loved to have cover around this topic of adaptability and what you're seeing and what's going on that we haven't covered?
Number one thing would be probably to talk a bit more about a one-liner. I know you like them because I've been watching your episodes, and that is about half the space, twice the experience. That
Half
is
the
what
space,
I'm
twice the
working
experience.
towards
Okay.
with our clients, right? Because if you really want to create a more engaged workforce, really unleash distributed work, there is a sum of money probably to get if you right size your space and it reinvest some of that savings into the experiences that actually happen when you're in the office. So half the space, twice the experience. That's what
Like
I'm
that.
working with every
Okay.
day.
Yeah.
That's probably a topic for another session.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's wide reaching,
Yeah.
in that um um I like that you've picked those things out because we all consume so much information, right? We've just rattled on together, having a conversation for some time. What are the lasting impressions? What do people remember? Remember
Mm.
stories, remember emotions. They hear it through their own experience, what
Yeah.
resonated to them. Half the space, twice the experience.
Because this is also where companies like us come in, and suddenly
Yeah.
we are in the midst of everything. We can curate the front of house experiences, the mid house and the back office experiences, because we already have people working there. We already do these services, but we can take care of much more of the curating with community captains, baristas, barceptionists, really doing those town hall meetings, a memorable experience. So that's kind of the everyday work I'm working
One of the
towards.
things I love about that is it feels like an invitation and inspiring than a burden. Because I've heard, oh, do more with less. And that
Yeah,
feels like, Jesus, that's a job to be done.
yeah,
That's hard work. Half the space, twice the experience sounds like such a creative, inviting
it is.
piece. Yeah, love that a lot. Love
Love
that a
that.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do
yeah,
as well. Yeah,
yeah.
it's really inspiring.
Very much so. Very much
Mm.
so. What a great framing and premise for problem solving for people to work
Yeah,
on and work towards because it, yeah, invites that.
because
Anything
then
else?
then distributed work actually works.
Yeah.
Because a lot of or most actually of the structured hybrid companies, those 86% of the Fortune 500 companies, they're really struggling at this point in time trying to make hybrid work because it's a
Oh,
lot of frustrations.
a lot of frustrations.
Yeah.
I've been having conversations with some very senior people in, the HR internal type of
Mm.
companies that employ, over 100,000. It's nowhere near 400,000, but,
Yeah.
I can recall two or three where I've been working and actually personally coaching a few of them that have had a mandate of return to office
Mm.
that they've got to roll out and roll through that is very tough to others that are working with a how do we figure out hybrid
Mm.
at scale that
Yeah.
functions, that works, and we're still figuring that out, right? We're still
Yeah.
figuring it out as a society, I think, of what do we want,
Yeah.
because all things are possible.
Yeah.
In terms of what you're really excited about of 2025, some things that
Mhm.
you're going to focused on, working on, give me a little flavor of some of those things that you're excited about in the year ahead. And then I've got my final question after that. We'll wrap up
All
there.
right. Yeah, I'm really exciting to see where this debate is going, because as you said, there are some, I would say, more conservative voices being happening at the same time as the new president in the US is being installed. A few of the companies that are voicing loudly that they are bringing their people back to the office 100% of the time. For example, JP Morgan. And I think that's fine. It's on brand. It's probably expected for them to do that. It's probably their fifth time where they try to bring people back, and maybe this time they will manage. Let's see. I'm interested in following these stories. What I think as well is super interesting to follow. If you look at the full-time in office companies, they are building these magnetic offices because they have understood that they need to provide the best place to work in order to compete with anything. They are also struggling with recruitment at this point in time, because most of the people, they prefer having some kind of flexibility in their lives. If you look at the hybrid companies, they struggle with making hybrid work. As we just said, right-sizing the space, creating a better experience, removing obstacles. And the fully flexible ones, they have figured out that they need to meet. They also invest in the actual workplace experience.
Yeah, we do an annual workation.
Yeah,
because we're all remote, and we get together and we pay for everybody coming from to be in the same place at the same time, even at our small scale. Of doing those things because we want to, we want to be connected.
And I think in response to that, if you compare these three buckets or different strategies, there is a mind-blowing thing happening right now. Because you have the full-time in office companies and you compare to the structured hybrid companies, they both still work synchronously, because this is how we have learned how to do it. So the full-time and office companies, they are just continuing working in the same working model as they've been doing. But the hybrid companies, they are also continuing working synchronously. And this is why a lot of the frustrations appear. People are being forced to travel in 2 to 3 days in the week. They sit in hybrid screen meetings synchronously between 9 to 5, wondering why they're sitting in the office. It's so easy to just invite somebody to a digital meeting because they think, or people think, that we have to work synchronously. So I'm thinking that those 86% of companies who are actually structured hybrid, of the Fortune 500 companies, the next frontier will be for them to learn asynchronous collaboration. With help of digital tools, or really figuring out how many meetings do I actually need. I don't need to have meetings for the full managerial layer all day long, every single week, because it's just destroying productivity and burning out people.
And I think we've got an opportunity of the natural generational shift of a more disposition to asynchronous work, because they've been exposed to technology and a way in which asynchronous. I speak a lot with Keith Ferrazzi. I don't know if you're familiar with him and some of his work, that is a proponent of how do we get team performance, and asynchronous work is now so possible with technology. We were doing it before because of time zones and doing things. Now we don't, like you say, need to be at the same place digitally on Zoom to make progress, and we can use things to bring people up to speed, to not have to be there through all of it, get the notes, get the snapshot recordings, get those pieces, and then contribute to a working document, rather than who's got the latest version on the SharePoint. All of these things, it's layered from the cloud technologies to now being able to work asynchronously, and without it then being task robots, without losing the dialogue, without losing the connection and the discussion. And it's where does that pendulum and balance shift? So that's exciting, isn't it? That's an exciting.
It's really exciting to follow if large companies of this world can learn asynchronous work, because then the efficiency gains will be enormous. People will
they've got to unlearn synchronous work.
Exactly, and that's a pain, and it may be too difficult actually, but I'm curious to see how this development progresses.
And I think our tool can provide insights to how they can do that, and who might lead it, who might struggle, who needs the support to go through those transitions of new playbooks. Because one thing is having the playbook, the second thing is then it actually being implemented and followed.
Sure.
About it. So my last question, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Ooh.
And what was it?
Wow. Yeah, that was quite recent actually. I tried a new competition format, which is called Hyrox. Super demanding, new type of sport. There's a traveling circus all over the world, and they visit city by city by city, but the competition is actually the same. And I do that with my girlfriend, so we are a team. So you start with running 1 kilometer, and then you do the first station. It may be rowing for 1 kilometer. Then you run another kilometer, and then there's a second station, and you do, different stations. There are 8 stations, and you do this on the shortest potential time that you can do it. Mind-blowingly tough competition to prepare for, because how do you even exercise, or how do you even train for these 8 different stations at the same time as you're also fit enough to run in between as fast as you can? So that challenge of really preparing for it was tough. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. And we started off when we, connected at the beginning of the call before the recording, where you'd just done your morning exercise. So you're somebody who exercises a lot, has been elite, and equally, your trainer you shared with me is somebody who trains Olympic athletes, and it's been fascinating, just to observe you and your energy. And I think that's an important part I'd like to leave us all with, is with all of this change, with all of this shift, is what's the energy that we bring to something? How are we showing up? How are we present? And how do we invest the time to ensure that we're healthy when we're coming into something, rather than I'm so exhausted? And I think that's critical in times of immense change, is that we carve out the time to ensure we don't thrive, but actually we're killing ourselves, that the company's working, this is working, but along the way we've become unhealthy.
Exactly. And I've been transforming the way I live my life, the way I work, so vastly over the last 5 years, that I am now at a point where I feel sustainable.
Good.
I've, switched traveling to different parts of the world all the time into utilizing technology, working distributed, being there much more for my kids, really spending time on my own personal health, to really feel that I'm here for the long term.
You've got vitality, got a good frequency, and able to enjoy the journey, as you've talked about. It is a journey of leadership and innovation, and that starts with self, right?
Exactly. So I really feel that today I am the sustainable executive that a lot of other leaders don't even know yet that they should be looking for, because of utilization of my AI team, freeing up time, really looking at time in a different way. Where do I want to be present, and what kind of impact do I want to do? So yeah,
That's beautiful.
I'm very exactly on your side of things on this. And maybe as well, I know as I said before, you love these one-liners. As a head of future work, working in the workplace industry, it's really evident for me that in the future, real estate is no longer the centerpiece for any workplace strategy. People are. That's also quite beautiful, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. And where we see a transition of technology, people over tools and technology.
Yeah.
They're inert. We give them a purpose, and let's do that consciously and intentionally. The challenge, of course, sometimes is we can't foresee some of those downstreams. They catch us by surprise, but we can respond to them. We can think about them. And yeah, I like that, of the shift from real estate to people. And I'd put that in a similar category of from, this thirst for technology and tools to people. How does it better people's lives, people and planet?
Yeah. The thing is that human is probably the new luxury when AI is developing with the speed that we see. Would you rather buy an expensive piece of art from an AI or a real artist?
Yeah. I'm conscious of time. Are you okay for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I had a life-changing experience last year. I went to Bhutan,
Hmm.
and they had an event there called the Bhutan Innovation Forum. It's the
Hmm.
largest event Bhutan's ever put on in their entire history, and there were 650 odd international guests to this. Logistically, a nightmare for a country. The country is 800,000 population. To get in there is very challenging and difficult, not only logistically. So there's I think 20 pilots that are licensed in the world that can land. It's 3,500 meters high where the airport is. It's a very short runway.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And my wife and I went, I was speaking at this event, and the king has a new vision called the Mindfulness City, taking over about 3.5% of the land mass. So I think it's around 2,600 square kilometers. Is a big vision, 30, 40-year vision to build a new mindfulness city that looks at what is Bhutan's role in the world as a carbon negative country.
Yeah.
How does it ensure it's not left behind? It doesn't sacrifice its soul, but also attracts and retains some of its talent, because some of its youth are going to Australia, Canada, UK,
Mm.
those sorts of things. And to your point of artistry, they have limited resources. And so a lot of it isn't about scale. So where they have the coffee or the chocolate or the fabrics and dyes, it's limited resource, very sustainable. It's high end. The tourism is high value, low impact tourism.
Yeah.
And the art, you speak with the artist who's gone out into the forest to forage for the rhododendron, for the chestnuts, to make the pigments, to then paint the painting that has taken them 2 months or three
Yeah.
months to paint. And it was profound being in the energy and space of that experience, versus when I've been at Singularity University years ago, when you're seeing an artist's impression via an AI and computer generated
Yeah.
into
It's
physical
it's
form.
it's something
Totally
else.
different. It's something
Yeah.
else. And
Yeah.
I think all has value in different parts and different
Yeah.
ways. But it was beautiful to just experience of, this lad who'd created some tinctures, from different things. And of course, again, it's not about mass production for them, which makes it quite exclusive, quite expensive, but you
Mm.
get such a artisan creativity in there. Oh, this is a woven piece from nettles, and it's
Yeah.
dyed in this way. And so it was fascinating to almost rewind back to a world that I could imagine it was maybe several hundred years ago
Yeah.
inside Bhutan. And they were, they're famous for being the, happiest place. They're not around GDP, but gross happiness index.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. Anyway.
I hear that, and I can see that. And I again, I'm repeating myself that human is probably the new luxury going
Yeah.
forward. It's a lot of that, a lot of indication that that will happen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm going to call it on this one. It's been an absolute joy. I was looking forward to this one. Thank you for showing up as you. I appreciate that. And I know that our listeners will too.
Thank you very much, Ross. Happy to be here and happy to talk about stuff that I'm just passionate about.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQ-Me assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.